Hi, I'm Lori Kranenburg. I am the founder of Dreams and Ladders and the creator of the Career Accelerator program, and I want to welcome you to our first episode. I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit about who I am and why I created the company and the program. So let's start. I spent 25 years working in the Canadian Forces Reserves. 12 of those were with the Army Reserves and 13 were with the Air Force. I was trained as a logistics officer in both the Army and the Air Force, although I did spend a lot of my career working in training and operations. I've also been a police officer for over 20 years, so I did do some of that work concurrently because I'm not that old. I worked in a very large metropolitan police service. I worked criminal investigations for most of that time. Really enjoyed the work, but I do know what it's like to work in male-dominated professions, having been in both military and policing. I've also been a competitive athlete for the last 15 years. I am a pistol shooter and I have competed at international events around the world. So I come to the profession of leadership coaching with a bit of a different background, having spent so many years working in male-dominated professions, and then also having that mindset and that desire to succeed that comes from being a high-performance athlete. I grew up in a military family. I've lived all over Canada, used to move every couple of years, so I've gotten used to adapting to change and being resilient. And so that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I come with a variety of experience that I bring to my own work and that I bring to help other women succeed. So why did I get into this? Why did I get into the field of leadership coaching, and why did I create Dreams and Ladders? I remember back around 2004, 2005, driving home from work, being really frustrated that I had just been passed over in another round of selections for specialized positions. And to say I was frustrated would be a little bit of an understatement because I'm intelligent, I was ambitious, and I wanted to get ahead and I wanted my chance. And it just felt like every time I applied, the answer was no. And I was like, what do I do? I didn't feel like I had anyone to turn to for help. I didn't have a mentor. And the other women that I worked with were all in the same boat. We were all around the same amount of experience and just trying to figure out how do we carve our path. So I got a little analytical. I remember back to when I was about 14, 15, I had been at a summer camp and we were doing rock climbing and we had been climbing this mountain face. And I'm 5'2". I'm pretty short. And the people I was climbing with, they were both 6 feet, the instructor and the other guy on our team. And there was this big overhang that was there. And it just happened to be at a spot on the mountain that was about 2,000 feet above all of this scree down below. So a scary spot to be in. I had a rope and we were anchored in, but you never trust your equipment. You want to trust your own hold on the mountain, on the rock. So here I am, they're above me and they've already gotten past this obstacle and I'm hanging on for dear life because I'm kind of terrified at that point in time because I'm looking down and I'm like, that's a long way and that's really going to hurt. And I know I can't stay here stuck on this overhang for forever. So what do I do? And they were trying to tell me that there was a handhold just above me and I couldn't see it and I didn't believe them and I didn't want to trust them and I didn't want to change and shift because if I left where I was and where I was secure, then that was going to be really scary trying to push myself forward. After debating this for a few minutes and realizing that I can't stay here forever on the side of the mountain, I'm going to have to find a way around it. I told them to hold the rope tight and I pushed with all of my strength up onto my tiptoes and then I could see it. There it was. There was this little handhold just above, just out of reach, the one that they've been trying to tell me had been there all along. And so that got me thinking, let's shift the perspective a little. So you keep trying the same thing over and it's not working. So how do I get ahead? What do I need to change about what I'm doing, about my skills, my development in order to be the successful candidate the next time? And I started looking at people that were already in the investigative positions and what was it that they had that I didn't have. And I considered everything. I considered from down to how they appeared professionally, to what skills they had developed, to how they presented in the workplace. And I really thought through where are they at and where am I at and what's the gap? And then I got to work. And I got really good at developing the skills that I had identified as what I needed to advance. And that was a system that I've applied over and over again in different variations. And that's what has served me in helping to move me forward in my career. That and many other skills that I've developed along the way. But that was the catalyst moment. That was when I sat there and said, you know what? Let's take ownership of this. Instead of waiting for things to happen, let's make them happen. Let's get a little analytical and then let's figure out what we need to do and then push forward. I'm coming up on the end of my career in policing, and I know that I'm going to be retired quite young, and I started looking at what can I do for the rest of my life, because I'm way too young to just sit there and sip tea and ride off into the sunset. And I started looking at becoming an entrepreneur and building my own business. And it's a continuation of helping people. I've been helping people my entire career, but now I get to focus on what I'm really passionate about, and that is helping women succeed. Because I know what it's like. I know how it feels to be ambitious and be passed over, to find yourself second guessing your decisions and questioning your performance and thinking, do the men just have some special skill that I don't have? Am I really missing something here? To get into those interviews and not have all of the same background and experience that my male counterparts have. And so it becomes that much harder to answer the interview questions. And then inevitably, if you've worked in a male-dominated environment long enough, you know that there are some extra challenges that come from working in these professions as a woman, that it's challenging to find a mentor. You really need to work hard at building your support network. You have to deal with things like really difficult bosses. There are the male bosses that are stuck in the 1960s and aren't going to value the women that work for them no matter how hard you try. And then there's also those women that have come before you that can be really challenging to work for, because instead of helping you, they compete with you. And so you find yourself in a position where you can feel really stuck sometimes. If you don't have the support above, how do you get ahead? And then there's also dealing with sexual harassment and gender discrimination and deciding, do you document it? Do you fight it? Or is it a scenario where you win the battle, lose the war if you take that on? And then just trying to navigate that and figure out, what do you do? And then there's also, when you work in an extremely toxic work environment, finding that strategy to get out of there. And it can be really hard to admit that, you know what, this place is not going to allow me to advance and see my dreams. So I'm going to have to take action to actually exit, but to do it in a way that doesn't damage the rest of my career. So all of these things come up, and you're just wishing someone would hand you the guidebook on how the heck do I navigate this? You know, and that can be really challenging as well. And so when you put all of that together, questioning your performance, struggling to progress, not knowing how to take the proactive action to be in charge of your career, and then all of that together, your presence in the workplace suffers. I completely understand what that's like. So what we do at Dreams and Ladders, and why I created the company and why I created the Career Accelerator program, was to address all of this. So the first thing we work on is performance. We work on mindset, and there I draw on a lot of my experience from being an athlete on developing that I will win mindset and applying that to your career. Then we also look at skill development, because you don't want your skills to be the reason you get passed over. And let's face it, if you're going to compete as a woman in a male-dominated organization, your skills need to be solid. Don't give a reason to leave you behind. You need to be solid. So we get analytical and we look at, where are you at and where do you need to be? And let's push the boundaries and get out of our comfort zone and actually develop the skills that need growth. And then also just making sure we have that path to success and that we're tracking the things that matter. Because there's nothing worse than getting into an interview and realizing that you didn't keep track of things like, when did I deal with a difficult employee? Or tell me about a time you made a mistake and what did you do and what did you learn from it? And all these different kinds of behavioral questions or performance related questions that can come up about your ability to take on greater levels of responsibility within the organization. And now you find you haven't tracked the right things in your career, and you're trying to show that you are the best candidate, but you don't have the answers to meet the questions that are being asked. The next piece that we look at also is your progression. So a lot of times the mistake women make is that they focus so much on developing their technical skills. And you see this time and time again. You take courses, you go back to school, you get educational upgrading, and it's always focused on developing the technical skills. And so you end up out of balance, because there's really three sides to this. There's your technical skills, your leadership skills, and your emotional intelligence skills. And you need all three to succeed. Continually developing your technical skills and ignoring your leadership and emotional intelligence skills is going to leave you behind. So with Dreams and Ladders, one of the things we really focus on is developing those leadership skills. And with that, I'm talking about things like decision making and team building and relationship building, planning, organization, all of the things that go into being a good leader. And then we look at emotional intelligence, your self-awareness, your self-regulation, your positive outlook, your achievement orientation, all of these things that you need, that often this is the last area that we look at developing, and it's the area we probably need to focus on the most because it's really what sets people apart. And then communication. I find as women, we have a tendency to not speak up and use our voice. We'll shrink back and allow the men in the room to take over. And when you do that, no one knows the value that you bring. It stays stuck inside your head. So until you learn to speak up and use your voice and be confident, you can have all the skills in the world. No one's going to know what you bring because you haven't told them. And then the third piece that we look at with Dreams and Ladders is that proactive action. And what I find is that as women, we tend to be a bit passive with our careers. We hope that the right opportunity comes along. We hope that when that job comes up, that we're seen as the best candidate, but we don't take the steps to be proactive. We don't actively go out and ask somebody to mentor us. We don't actively go out and ask, how do I get the position that I really want? And a lot of times we stay stuck in bad work environments because we're afraid to take action and leave them because we think that if we do that, it's going to damage the rest of our careers. And then we're miserable and we come home and it creates an unhappy work environment, an unhappy home environment. And you just end up at the end of the day going, is this really what my life is all about? There's got to be more than this. So all of these factors together is what goes into creating your presence in the workplace as a leader. So if you have good performance, if you're progressing in your skill development and being well-rounded, and if you're being proactive in seeking out the opportunities, then you become recognized as that leader. You are that leadership presence where you are. And it flips. Now you're the person that they're coming to look for when those positions come up. You're the person that comes to mind. There may be others that come to mind as well, but now you're on the list. And that's where we want to be. That's what it's all about, to have that opportunity, to get a seat at the table, to get to that interview, to be able to highlight and showcase everything you've done, which you've been tracking all along because we talk about how to do that. And we will talk about that in future episodes. I plan to talk about all of these things in future episodes. So I hope that you will be tuning in and joining me as I go through and break all of this down and every time leave you with something that you can take away to work on to really develop your leadership and become that person in the organization that is the go-to person. So I'm going to tell you a little story about back when I was in the Army Reserves and I was trying out for the rifle team. And I was relatively new to this unit, and so I hadn't been issued all of my winter gear. And so I had to wear the leather combat boots, which had no insulation. And if you can picture a day where it's about -20, and although it was sunny, it was still really cold. Like it's one of those days when you like breathe in and your nose sticks together. It's that kind of cold. And I'm out there laying in the snow, and there's this crusty old civilian coach who's standing there, and he says, "If any of you from the weaker sex need to warm up, the building back there is open." Looking around, and I'm the only woman there. So the any of you from the weaker sex, obviously he was referring to me. And I was like, okay, no way. I am not going into that building to warm up. I am now staying put and I'm going to work my butt off to show you that I deserve to be here. And guess what? I did. I shot and made the team. I went on to several other competitions. From there, I ended up getting onto our military national team. I switched over into pistol shooting. And then now I shoot as part of the Canadian team. So I think that if I hadn't stuck it out that day, if I had allowed him to plant that seed of self-doubt that I wasn't worthy, that I should be inside warming up because I was too weak to stay outside and shoot with the boys, I would have given up a lot because I've enjoyed traveling around the world and competing. It's one of my passions. You can probably see the little character over my shoulder by the Dreams. That's one of the little trophies I won one. It's hand carved, so I really like that one. But if I'd just given up because he was defining who I was, then I wouldn't have been true to myself and I would have given up on a lot of opportunity. I have like tons of stories like this of where I faced adversity and where I've had to overcome it. And you know what? Yeah, it's hard. I ended up with frostbite that day. It took 3 days for my feet to thaw out and to be able to like walk without being pins and needles in pain. And I'm not saying anybody should have to get frostbite to prove their worth. But I'm just saying that's the kind of mentality that I bring to things, that I'm going to fight and I'm going to show you what I'm all about and what I'm capable of. And if you want to think that I'm the weaker sex, well, that just fuels my motivation to show you even more how I am not. So, I'm going to leave you with a tip. If you want to get started on creating your presence as a leader in the workplace, I'm going to suggest that the first thing you do is get out a notebook and start writing down everything that you are good at. And I mean everything. Physical skills, mental skills, I don't care if it's running, if it's creating calendars, if it's task lists, if you're super organized, if you're intelligent. Write down all your skills and attributes, everything. Okay? I want you to dump it all on a piece of paper, keep coming back to it. And the reason for this is that when you feel that voice of self-doubt creeping in, when someone else says something to you, like the weaker sex, and you start to doubt yourself, I want you to come back to this list and I want you to read it. And I want you to remember all the things that you are good at. And remember that no one can take away your sense of self-worth unless you let them. So create that list and use it as a guide. So when you have those crappy days and you're starting to question, do I even know what I'm doing? Yes, you do. Come back and read the list. So that just about concludes our first episode. I hope you've enjoyed learning a bit more about Dreams and Ladders and what we're all about, and that you've taken away something that you can work on to help develop your presence as a leader in the workplace. I also have a community on Facebook called Dreams and Ladders, Career Advancement and Leadership Development for Women, and it's where we interact and discuss ideas for our success, celebrate our wins, and just continue the conversation all around topics of leadership for women. Would love to see you in there. So that concludes this episode, and I will see you next time.